Then a little later in the program, we'll be talking about some new law in New Jersey, which declares new rights for the buyers of properties, and we'll have that explained by a member of the New Jersey Bar Association. To start, we have a booklet that is being put out by the New Jersey State Bar Association called New Rights for Buyers and Sellers Explained, Buying and Selling Real Estate. And it's being put out by the New Jersey State Bar Association. They're located at 172 West State Street in Trenton, New Jersey, 08608. I'll give that once again later. Going through this, the thrust of this does seem to be, Lee, that you should have a lawyer present with you if you're going to sell or buy a house. Is that correct?
Yes, in fact, Paul, it's our view that you should get the lawyer early in the transaction. Too many people assume that they don't need the lawyer till they get to the closing, but probably the most important time in the transaction is when they enter into the contract to buy or sell property. It's at that point that they set and establish their rights, and it's at that point that they might want the advice of a lawyer and should want the advice of a lawyer so that they know whether the transaction is set up reflects what they intend and what they want as part of the entire transaction. They need to know not only the price they're getting, but the terms and the timing, and they need to know exactly what they're buying.
Isn't this kind of a standard thing? Most people go into it. I know I've bought houses, and I've talked to people today who have had transactions very recently in which they had no lawyer present. They had people from banks, and they had real estate people, and so forth. There are standard forms that cover the mechanics liens and the title insurance and so on, so that unless it's a very complicated deal, a lot of people do without a lawyer. How can you get burned if you don't have a lawyer there?
Well, if you don't have a lawyer, you can end up with a title that might not be good, that might be difficult to sell later.
But isn't that a matter for title insurance rather than for a legal person?
Well, it's a matter of interpreting what the title is. The title insurance company will insure you, and they will say that we guarantee this title with certain exceptions. But unless you are sufficiently sophisticated or trained to understand those exceptions, then you may not know what you're buying. There can be exceptions relating to zoning conditions. There can be exceptions relating to setbacks, use of the property. You might end up buying a property subject to a utility easement through the backyard that prevents your building the swimming pool you've always wanted. And you wouldn't know that until you get ready to build that swimming pool. But if you've got a lawyer in the transaction, he will read the search, or he will read the title binder, and he will tell you what the limitations are. And you need to know that so that you know what you're ending up with as part of the transaction.
Mm-hmm. New rights for buyers and sellers explained. Now, what new rights do you have in the state of New Jersey as a result of recent legislation?
Well, the major thing is there's a Supreme Court decision. It's the result of a settlement from a long-term, probably the oldest case pending in the state. It's a case that the Supreme Court suggested be brought by the Bar Association almost 18 years ago. It's finally been settled between the Realtors Association and the lawyers of the state in the Bar Association. And that settlement has as one of its primary components the fact that if a real estate broker is to write a contract, that he may now do so without violating the law, but he must provide in it that there is a 3-day time period, 3 business days, in which there is an absolute right to rescind that contract so that either party can decide not to proceed with the transaction for that 3 business day period. To do so, they have to contact the lawyer and retain his services and have him cancel that contract for him. Of course, during that time period, in reviewing the contract with him, he can agree on their behalf that they'll proceed with the purchase or sale subject to certain conditions and contingencies. And that's the opportunity to have the transaction clarified. That's the opportunity for the person to communicate what he really wants and have that built into the contract.
Mm-hmm. Is there a threshold at which you should begin doing this? Because it seems to me that for a low or medium priced house, it's pretty cut and dried. And up to this point, isn't it a standard practice for most of them to be handled probably at the title insurance office by the 2 real estate brokers involved, and and the individuals involved in the buying and selling without the presence of an attorney?
Well, New Jersey has two areas in which the traditions are different. In North Jersey, the area generally, Trenton and North, lawyers have traditionally been involved in the transaction from the earliest point when a contract is negotiated and before it's been signed. South of that, I think unfortunately, a practice has evolved where the real estate brokers and the title companies have handled a great deal of the transaction. And the buyers and sellers have really been left in the dark as to what their rights are. It's our hope that the practice that's existed in North Jersey will begin to blossom and come forward more fully in South Jersey so that people will have an opportunity to know what they're getting into and what their rights are.
Usually when a person goes into something like this, he's going into hock for 20, 30 years or something, and you're a little bit overwhelmed at the amounts of money involved, and if there is a place where you can cut a corner, why, you're more than anxious to do it. And lawyers can be terribly expensive because you fellas make $50 to $100 an hour, and a procedure like this could involve a number of hours of work.
It can involve a substantial amount of time, but only where there's problems, and that's where you need the lawyer most. In your normal real estate transaction today, it's rare that we see many transactions where a home is sold for much under $100,000. We see real estate brokers earning $6,000 and $7,000 as a commission for introducing the people. There's now a state-mandated fee schedule for the title insurance company charges for issuing the title policy and doing the search. And it's fairly rare that the lawyer's charge in a smooth transaction is as much or more than the title insurance company's charge. And it seems like a small bit of insurance to know that there's that one single person who's in there representing you as a buyer or seller, where every other person participating in a transaction are primarily representing their own interest. The broker has brought the people together and he wants to serve the people, but he's interested in getting that commission, and he only gets that if the transaction closes. The banker wants to protect himself in terms of the amount of money he's loaning, but there's a certain amount of equity in there, and he doesn't have to worry about protecting that. And the title insurance company is interested in making sure that they're not responsible for something beyond what the facts show. So they'll build exceptions into the title policy. They'll insure the lender against some things that they won't insure the owner against. And only the lawyer is going to point those differences out to the client he represents.
And the fee typically is not more than the title insurance company's
That's my
cost,
experience.
which is how much? Did you say it was 1%?
No, there's a
what?
published fee schedule, and I don't have a copy with me. It's state mandated by the Commissioner of Insurance. But I find in the average real estate closing, the buyers are paying their lawyers somewhere in the range of $400 to $600, maybe $700.
At what point do you think a person should involve a lawyer? I go to a real estate company and I look through a bunch of houses and I decide on one. At what point do you call in an attorney?
I think it's preferable to call in the attorney if you're the buyer before you sign anything. But at least today, and what the advantage of this new Supreme Court decision is it opens a 3-day window, even after you've signed the contract, that allows you the services of a lawyer to help you understand what you're committing yourself to and to protect you in that particular
That's
transaction.
an extension of something that started on books and a few other things, isn't it? Isn't there a consumer's law that covered other purchases that were made by door-to-door people?
There are a great number of them, and there are a variety of time periods. If you buy a condominium today, you get a 7-day period in which to reject it. If you use certain financing in buying carpeting or encyclopedias, you get 3 days within which to rescind the transaction. So it's not a great deal different than that.
And it's just been an extension of that general idea to real estate that we're commenting on today.
It is an application of that idea to this part of the process.
We're talking to Lee Roth. He is with the New Jersey State Bar Association. He's the last year's chairman of the Probate and Trust Law section of the Bar Association. We'll be back with him in just a moment. Wouldn't be a bad idea because it's got some suggestions for things that you ought to look for, whether or not you can get an attorney at all, although after you read this you might. New rights for buyers and sellers explained, buying and selling real estate, put out by the New Jersey State Bar Association, 172 West State Street, Trenton, New Jersey, 08608. Lee Roth is our guest. Review the contract of sale, assist you regarding your questions on matters such as termite inspections, structural inspections, municipal certificates of occupancy. There are a whole range of questions that are involved here, aren't there, Lee?
There are a great number of questions, and unfortunately, so many of them are overlooked, except by that person who's working just for you as the buyer or seller of the property. Many of the other people would just as soon gloss over them that are involved in the transaction. But just little things like what happens if you find some termite destruction? What happens if you have a structural inspection made of the house and you find something wrong, whether it's major or minor? Who pays for it? Who corrects it? The only way you're going to know is to refer back to that contract and see what does it provide for. And if it was not properly reviewed and doesn't provide protection for you, you can be stuck for a substantial amount of money.
You'd like to make sure, though, that you've got a lawyer that works on this kind of area on a regular basis. If you're going to involve a lawyer in this, you don't just want to go in the phone book and get a guy that works on drunk driving or something.
I agree with you.
How do you get somebody that...
One thing you do, most people get to their lawyers based on personal recommendations of other friends who've worked with them. But certainly in the process of selecting a lawyer, whether it's to represent you in a real estate transaction or anything else, I think you should ask him, how much of this kind of work does he do? What is his background? You don't want a lawyer who's off in court all day trying cases who you can't reach on the phone because he's not there handling this sort of thing. We're hopeful that the Bar Association will go in the direction of establishing specialization for some of the office specialties. They've done it in the trial area, as you may know. You now can find a state-certified trial specialist.
And Warren Berger would be happy to see this happen.
Well, and it's happened in New Jersey, and there are a number of people who have attained this certification through experience and tests. We're hoping to get to that in real estate.
It's available from the New Jersey State Bar Association, buying and selling real estate. I'm Paul Norton for Perspective New Jersey. Have a good day.